Welcome back to the Recovering Out Loud podcast. I'm your host, Charles Van Laux. Thanks for returning. Today we have a guest on the show, David Whitesock. He's the founder and CEO of Commonly Well. It's a very interesting platform that utilizes AI in a lot of interesting ways for our community. So welcome, David.
Thanks, Charles. Pleasure to have this conversation today. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, absolutely. Would you like to just start off by telling us a little bit about your platform and what makes it so unique?
Yeah, I mean, Commonly Well was kind of born out of solving the problem of bringing the idea of business intelligence to addiction, recovery, and behavioral health. So, businesses operate on information and they make decisions on information. Coca-Cola, the CEO of Coca-Cola, wakes up every day and looks at a spreadsheet or looks at a set of figures and numbers and says, well, we didn't do this yesterday. We better do this today. And healthcare doesn't really work like that. Yet we're dealing with some things that are way more important than cans of Coca-Cola, right? And so we've got a lot of data, we just don't know how to use it. And so we've been trying to solve that problem. And then in the middle of that, understanding that the people we work with aren't really data literate. And so trying to make that easy. Not everybody knows how to read a bar graph or a line chart. And so how do we make that simple, not just for the practitioners, whether they're coaches or peer support or clinicians, but also the clients, the members, the patients. They answer questions and we want to give them feedback, but how do we not scare them? How do we make that information usable and meaningful for their journey? So that's what we try to do. And then of course we're sprinkling in all the latest technologies and sophistications of what's ahead of us to still make it easier.
I love that. And, that's one thing that I remember meeting you at the symposium. And that's one thing that really stood out is the desire for something better, to utilize all of today's tools for our community. I love that approach. And I think that it's 100% needed, because the only way that I see this issue, especially in the first year, getting any better is to apply technology wherever we can.
Yeah. I've overcome addiction myself. And, when I'm stuck, when I'm trying to solve a problem, I always go back to that first year of the last time I had to overcome addiction. But then I also think about the other years before that, the previous 12 years where I really struggled. And it was so hard. Recovery was so hard. And there's a million reasons why it was so hard. Systems it wasn't a system. There was a lot of stigma. There was a lot of discrimination. There's a lot of just, you haven't decided, David. So until you decide, we'll be here for you. And just a lot of that and a lot of me not being ready too. But there's so many things that could have worked better, but just didn't. And so I don't think the recovery process has to be as hard as we make it. Both the system,
I fully agree.
Yeah, both the system and then us ourselves. Like we make it really hard, both the ones that are working in the system and the people actually in the recovery process. We make it very hard. And so I think we can take a lot of the guesswork out and I think we can make that process so much easier.
Yeah, I do as well. And, I remember personally, I just felt such a massive just step down in care, leaving treatment, and then having all of these things for myself, that I had to go and take care of. But I remember, I think that that's one thing personally that has really led me to the peer model and really just, I've seen some amazing success in some of my own clients in the peer model. And I feel like, utilizing that same approach and adding in technology, adding in, ways to find care. Even just that alone is a challenge, for a lot of people, the access to care, so difficult sometimes, and it's kind of an uphill battle for some people.
Yeah, because addiction's a beast. Substance use disorder, it's a beast. And it for a lot of people that end up showing up in the moment where they need that care, they have eroded a lot of things. They've kind of been stripped down to bare. And So accessing care at that point, when you're coming up from underneath the waterfall, is so hard. And we haven't built a system. Our system isn't built for somebody who's what I like to call a rising risk. We use the image of the iceberg, where we see in the system is that top part above the water. But there are another 50 to 80 million people under the water. They're the rising risk folks. They're the ones that are, maybe the weekend drinkers, and they've been weekend drinking for about 3-4 years. And now that's carrying over into the week because they got a stressful job or whatever it might be. And it's starting to become way more than just a dependency, right? Mm-hmm. And they're starting to make some silly decisions, bad decisions. Addiction manifests. And that rising risk, that person, if we wanted to capture that person to get that person help now, they couldn't get help because you try to get them into a treatment facility and the treatment facility is like, I only got room for Medicaid patients. Well, I have insurance, but we only take Medicaid patients. Well, why don't you take me? We only take Medicaid patients. And now they got to go out of network. Right. And so they're traveling 500, 1,000 miles away, and the family isn't understanding this. It's like, well, so what does the guy do? He just goes back to his regular life. The system isn't designed for those folks. And so they, linger and languish for 2, 3, 4, 5 more years, lose a job, lose a family. Now they're homeless. I mean, you know the story. And I just think if we made sort of peer support more attainable, more approachable, further upstream. Like it's not just, I don't just do peer support after treatment. I can do peer support before treatment.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
I think if people knew that and understand that would change a lot of the flow of people needing care.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And I think more of a proactive approach can be worthwhile because a lot of people, I mean, I remember myself even, right? I could convince myself when I was sitting inside of a burning building that everything was fine because I wasn't currently on
That's
fire. Right. I mean, the things we can convince ourselves of in active addiction is insane. So more of a proactive kind of approach, like, oh, hey, I noticed there's some smoke and a couple of flames. Maybe I should get out of here. Maybe I should find out how I can even find the exit. Maybe there's somebody who has, gotten out of this building before who can help lead, right? That whole peer model. And I really do hope that, comes on much earlier in the process as well, because I mean, it can still be very effective, but I think that earlier on, we don't have to go through all that pain on our own, right? Like I talk often about gaining that map, right? Like for me, for example, I gained that map in the rooms. So I would go to meetings and I would listen to these people's stories and I'd say, oh, okay, there's a landmine over there. Got it. Okay, I'm not going over there. Cool. Oh, he tried this. Didn't work at all. Got it. Okay. And then I could kind of start to build my map so that I didn't have to personally go through all of that heartache and drama and everything, but I could still kind of gain the rewards from it, And I think that can also apply here with a peer. They can help to guide away from those landmines. They can help to show where the better road is.
Yeah, it's challenging because so much of this work, so much of how we get people to go from a place of sitting in the room, a burning room, but they're not yet on fire, is our stories. And I'll say something kind of controversial, but much of what we do in terms of those stories is it's basically just redemption porn. It's resilience porn. And, many people just like to throw those stories out there and it gets worse and worse and worse. So one person tells a story, you've probably seen this in the rooms. One person tells a story and the next person comes up and it's worse. And the next one tries to top that. And we do that over and over and over again. And I don't know, my experience always was I didn't understand what I was supposed to get from that. Was I supposed to get that, oh, I'm not bad enough yet? And I psychologically, what I've learned since is that's exactly what's happening. People are registering and going, oh, I'm not that guy. I've got a long way to go before I reach that. So I don't need these 12 steps. I don't need to go to the counselor or a therapist. I'm out of here, Jim. And so that's tricky too. And so how do we change that narrative of, I love what you said, the hole doesn't have to be deep. It could just be a small little hole, but deep enough that I need a ladder. And if somebody can just reach their hand down or throw the ladder down and say, no, I've been in that hole before. I'm going to come down in there and show you the way out. Again, it doesn't have to be a giant hole. It just, let's get you out now. Let's start sprouting this tree today.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I loved what you talked about with, the one-uppers, the people in meetings who have to, tell a worse story and a worse story and all that. And, it reminded me of this young client that I had. Obviously I won't give any detail, but I had this young client a while ago who essentially felt at least pushed away from the rooms for that very reason. He felt that his substance wasn't strong enough, right, in terms of like severity to earn his place in the rooms or whatever, right? He felt that his stories weren't dark enough and this and that. And it's true. I think that any person going through any kind of heartache, right, any kind of substance, any kind of whatever, always should have a place to call home where they can find that support. They can find that care and that wisdom and hope. Matter of fact.
So when I start having the conversation like this, I always like to just bring up that we don't, if anybody's experienced themselves or in their family cancer, you never see any of this in the cancer world. It's never like, oh, you've only got stage 1 cancer. I've got stage 4. I'm worse off than you. No. Yeah. Cancer's cancer. And it's scary either way. And you show up to one of those support meetings and it's like, you're here, I'm here. What do you need? What do you need right now? Are you just scared? Are you frightened? It's going to come. What do you need? And we don't do that very well in our space. And I think it's just because it's long held traditions of the way things have done, but that stuff is starting to age out. And I'm kind of optimistic about that. I've sat in some other circles and some other places where, the support rooms are much more, hey man, you're here for whatever reason you showed up today. Cool. It doesn't have to be, over traumatized or over dramatized. It doesn't have to be any of that, but you're here today.
Yeah.
You don't feel like you should. Life isn't what you want. What do you want? How can I help? It's not more complicated than that.
Absolutely. I agree. And, I think that's the reason why I'm so excited to see, new tools, and I'm excited to see, new support groups, new everything. I think that it's all growing a lot, and I think that it's becoming more socially acceptable, I suppose, less taboo to talk about these things and explore them and try and help one another and have a mental health day even, right? Those kinds of things. And I think it's all kind of pointing towards a much brighter future for, our entire community, really. And, you had mentioned something interesting in our pre-show conversation about the math doesn't math, I wonder if you could touch on that for our viewers.
Yeah. So why does peer support even exist? Right. It exists because the addiction treatment system that was in place 20, 30 years ago